I heard about the media this morning, about the conference, about the culture of dialogue, and I was very interested and I learned a lot from all the people who interfered. But do you know how much it's invested really by the donors to the media? The donors allocate only 1% of the total budget worldwide for media. And all the studies have proved that economic sustainability, economic improvement is very much related to free press or free media. We all remember Nobel laureate Amartya Sen's dictum when he said, "There has never been a famine in any country that has been a democracy with a relatively free press. I know of no exception." When he mentioned this, after experience and research, I have with me here 26 research about the importance of media in economic improvement. But the question will be, which kind of media to be the link between the international development and the need of dialogue at the national level? The dissemination of credible information in a timely manner depends critically on how the media business is managed first, and more importantly, second, and how it's regulated. Adopting a law, as we all know, is not enough to be effective or to be enforced. An effective media is a must in supporting economic development to reach the certain level of criteria in the Millennium Goal of the United Nations. And the three criteria for the effective media on both sides, the humanitarian dialogue and the international development, are independence, quality, and reach. The problem we're having in our region is if we have nation states or local community, whichever the context is, individuals and groups continuously struggle to negotiate their relationship with the state and with each other in ways that may challenge basically their citizenship and their format and the current format today. The latest research in McGill proved that the social actors from our region and also in Africa, they have to deal with entrenched social inequity that are the legacy of colonialism. They seek right and access to resources to continue in their improvement, and this access is denied for them. The World Bank in 2002 issued the very important publication considered as a benchmark in the evidence how media could interfere in the economic development and how it could sustain the dialogue within the national interest. Poland and Hungary succeeded that process. Ukraine couldn't, and mainly because of the weaknesses of the press there. If economic growth is a prerequisite, the problem we're facing with international development momentum now is that it's not absorptive enough to create jobs, and if it creates jobs, it's not equal in income, and if it creates jobs equal in income, it's not high income enough to integrate inflation and create savings. In the economy where there is no savings, this economy cannot really be stable and cannot look into the future with hopes. And how could you dialogue or create a dialogue between components of a society where there is inequality, where there is less freedom, and where the income is not at the gender level or at the skills level. Most of the countries, and Lebanon had this experience before, several Gulf regions has the same problem, Algeria have the same problem. Even if the growth is high, it's not absolvative to the new generation. How do you want a young person, qualified, or at least having a diploma, to be able to sit around the table and think, to dialogue and accept diversity? Because when you negotiate, you don't care about diversity. You care about the interest. And you try to find a mechanism to settle these differences in interest. But when you're in a diversity, an entrenched diversity, ideological, ethnical, religion, social, historical, how would you then be able to dialogue if you cannot start by accepting the other party as they are, all multi-party? Lebanon as a model succeeded with its 18 communities, which is a diversity in a sense, to find in a mechanism which is not fully performing today for several reasons, but still it is a dialogue and not a negotiation. It is an acceptance and not only interest-based. Every time it goes to interest-based, it becomes negotiation, and then you have international parties getting into that interest mechanism. When you're on the acceptance side, you settle it nationally to a certain extent. 3 ideas in order to conclude the first element. The agriculture used to be a very, very solid mechanism of interacting between people and their nature. The world and the international development since the 80s neglected agriculture. We moved into finance and we moved into innovation and technology, and we neglected what we call the real economy until the crisis in 2008. One of the major requests worldwide, and in our Arabic region, because we have a lot of land and a lot of water and a lot of workers, is to go back and re-inject the agriculture strategy as a status of development based on more and more acceptance of diversity. And the most important, as I heard the University of Venice, that is respecting time, lowering the speed. The second element in our region, and this is a humanitarian attitude in international development, item 2, is that we need more skilled Arabic citizenship. More skilled, not only morely educated. When I have a lot of educated people with unemployment and frustration, we need these people in the international development to get more skilled. And the last item is the diversity and flexibility. The question always comes, how can we recreate an improvement if the state is a failing state, if the community is in struggle, if the media is so weak as His Highness mentioned this morning? How really can we take a certain lead? There is a change in the power game in the world that we can take advantage in our region. As you know, in the world economic power and leadership, America, smashed Britain in the 20s, took the lead in Bretton Woods in 44, and then it was balanced by Soviet Union until 91, by Japan in the 80s, by Europe in the 70s, and now we hear a lot gossips and sometimes advice, leave America, guys, for your economic and international development and go to China. China is the next leader. And in our region, as center of the world between the two, we are always attracted to take a position. And this will be my final conclusion for the major intervention. Can we consider as China developing or developed country? Could we believe that the Chinese model could be an empowering of a dialogue in international development? If we consider that America was the architecture of the economic world with the IMF, the World Bank, and the WTO, didn't succeed really to create since 2000 until now for 15 years, couldn't succeed really to redynamize exactly the world, its economic improvement, and encourage dialogue. Would China do? If I do a quick comparison, and I conclude with our economic zone proposal, if I go to the purchasing price parity, which is, income equal to income, yes, China is at 17% now from the global GDP, and America is 16, neck to neck. But when I go to real exchange, America is 24 and China is less than 40. When I look at the export, at the international development only by the trading mind, which there will be no dialogue there, it's only consumption. And this is what we are facing. I heard the professor from political science talking about the research on the value. How can we recreate a system of value to encourage the basis of dialogue? The consumption, the cost, this is all what people hear about. And our problematic today is true. In 1996, 20 years ago, China used to export to 2 countries, it's exporting to 44. There is a product domination. And would the dialogue be reduced or improved with the international dominance between these 2 economic leadership? And our intervention, as requested, is more questioning one and less solution one. One model succeeded, and it could be a good success for our region, is the economic zone. We do believe that if the state remains like this, if the community remains like this, rather than being locked in our countries by the political crisis and our investment are freezed by the security crisis, could we take a more courageous dialogue and go and say, okay, in the south of Syria, let's go for an economic zone with Jordan. Zone partagée, zone protégée. We take a common stake and we try to protect it. Do the same on the north with Turkey. Try to create a mechanism for Iraq. Try to create a mechanism with Lebanon in order to create not an economic zone for tax evasion and productivity enhancement within the country, not the model of offshore. It's the model where we can maintain our national identity but move more into the productivity dialogue that could lead to stability. Because I heard a lot about the difficulty of the regional regime, of the religious clash, and so on. But we can take the dialogue more and more towards what we qualify as territory of dialogue and productivity. 2,300 economic zones in the last 30 years around the world. They shifted from 25% being private to 60% to be private. And all of these are in order to create what we qualify as a multi-dimension dialogue. A dialogue within the national components, the dialogue across the borders, and the dialogue with world economic powers. There will be always an interest if, like today, all this elite audience gather around this voice, try to maintain a voice going up day after day, calling for a dialogue that is beyond only meeting, accepting the diversity cross-border and within the national momentum should have a unified goal. The national identity in the Arab world is no more a unifying goal. but the well-being of people could be a unified goal. From that point, I would like to conclude with the recent economic Nobel laureate, professor from Princeton, Angus Deaton. He was just nominated, or he won the prize. And I felt in his invention two notes that are very valuable for our region. He said the theory should tally with data. And the Arab world has a problem, no clear data, no published data. But he adds, no panic. Puzzles and inconsistencies help to promote innovation. Second positive note from this economic Nobel laureate, the average is rarely good enough. The Arab world will be satisfied with average. You know, they don't like the polarization, let's go with the average. And he says, the average is rarely good enough. It's only by understanding differences between people that we can understand the whole as such. I hope in my 15 minutes respected time, I highlighted the issues that I was requested by the organizers, and thank you for listening.
It's an important speech, Dr. Kattar. Thank you very much. You spoke about economy, but in general about politics. And you remember us how important is the political will. We have also good news in the last 10 years in the world. I mean, when we speak about AIDS pandemic, you remember 10 years ago, I remember in Africa, panel with funeral plan. The only thing to do was to pay the funeral before the death. And all the world was thinking that no solution. And the so-called experts, il faut se méfier de temps en temps des experts, made